On today's show, the Hawks avoid the three-game sweep in New York by winning on this Tuesday over the New York Knicks at MSG. A roller coaster, to be sure, in a game that was marred by injuries, but in the end, a victory for the Hawks on the road. We'll get into all of what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1668 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Tuesday evening into Wednesday here in early March. And I want to encourage you, as I always do on the podcast, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts. That includes places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify on the audio side, as well as YouTube on the video side. I should also plug that I did a two-part episode that went up just a couple of days ago now with my friend Glenn Willis of ATL and 29. That's a fun conversation. Always talk to Glenn a little bit longer than usual too on part two of that, but a fun deep dive there to listen to at least at the beginning of this week. And honestly, we'll focus most of this podcast, even though there was a little bit of transactional news on Monday, on what became a nice win for the Hawks. 116-100 up in New York against the Knicks on this Tuesday evening. It was basically, I would say, marred by some injury stuff. It was kind of the walking wounded coming in. Both teams banged up considerably. And honestly, I got a lot of feedback from people around the league that were kind of like, man, this not a lot of luster in this one. Famously, TNT pulled this game about a couple weeks ago, and I think they probably are glad about that at this point in time. But the Hawks don't care about that, nor should they. And in the end, they got this nice road victory over the Knicks that stopped a two-game losing streak and, of course, avoided the sweep of this bizarre 6-day trip to New York. So the Hawks led this game by 22 points in the first half. They were up by 21 points with 4 minutes to go before halftime. And then in kind of on-brand fashion for this Hawks team, they blew the entire lead. In fact, the game was tied multiple times late in the third quarter. And then on the bright side, the Hawks did close this game out very well in the fourth quarter. A nice closing kick on the hole. And the Knicks just couldn't score for a while. That was certainly beneficial to the Hawks. And a comfortable-ish win down the stretch. Although I'm not even sure if this final margin was indicative. Sometimes it was. The Hawks were pretty good for most of this game. And they were pretty brutal in the middle of the game for a little while. But in the end, a nice victory that we'll break down in deep dive fashion. I mentioned that it was a walking wounded kind of situation on both sides. Of course, Trae Young remains out for the Hawks, as does Onyeka Okongwu, so two of their top 6 or 7 players, of course, including their best player. Kobe Buffkin was listed as questionable with left big toe soreness in this game. He was ruled out this afternoon. Obviously, not going to change the projections a ton, but obviously, Hawks fans are looking forward to watching Kobe as much as possible right now. He couldn't play in this game. And then the Knicks didn't have 4 of their top 7 players, including their best player in Jalen Johnson, their second best player in Julius Randle, and I would probably argue their third best player in OG Anunoby. All didn't play in this game, plus Mitchell Robinson was about for a while, but still, essentially 6 of the top, 10, 11 guys on these two teams didn't play, including all 3 guys that were all-stars this year that could have played. And that's, of course, Young, Brunson, and Randall. All were out, so, it was, at least it was kind of even. In fact, our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook made the Hawks only 1-point underdogs in this game, despite being on the road. And the Knicks are, record-wise, pretty good this year. A top 5 team in the East, but they were so banged up, and the Hawks were banged up for sure, but they were actually the healthier team in this game, and that kind of led to them being kind of a coin flip in this game, and they were able to play well and, of course, win it in the end. So, broadly speaking, we'll start with the defense as far as the analysis is concerned. In this one, they had a 105 defensive rating in this game, and a lot of things happened at once, honestly. Number one, the Hawks did play well. I want to state that very plainly. The Hawks played well defensively in this game for the most part. They had a good game plan, I thought, against a very limited opponent. Once it became clear that Brunson was not going to play, they don't really have an offensive engine. So the Knicks were going to be reliant. I think it was pretty foreseeable, but I think Quinn probably saw this, as did the staff. The Knicks were going to basically be hoisting threes as their primary objective because, the guys that they did have, who I would describe as good offensive players, DiVincenzo, Alec Burks, Bojan Bogdanovic, are all kind of perimeter-based players. Hartenstein's a pretty good player on the interior. Josh Hart I like a lot, but not an offensive engine. Miles McBride, their starting point guard, is definitely a defender first. So they didn't really have anyone to pressure the rim, and the Hawks knew that. And I think they knew that the Knicks were going to have to make threes to beat them. Number 2, though, the Knicks didn't make threes, and that was very fortunate, I thought, in this game. In the end, the Knicks were 16 of 52 from 3 in the game. That is massive volume. And I'm sure that Quinn Snyder would undoubtedly say, as he has many times this year, that you do not want to give up that many 3-point attempts. There's sort of a debate, a new school, old school kind of debate about like whether you want to take a lot of threes, all that stuff. I can tell you this: Quinn Snyder is analytically friendly, and I think that he would always say, and has always said, that you don't want to allow a ton of at least open looks from three. And the Knicks, I got to say, if you watch the game back, it's even more obvious, got a lot of open looks in this game and missed them all. Not all of them, obviously, but their two best shooters, you could argue, or at least two of their best shooters. DiVincenzo, by the way, is currently number 3 in the NBA in 3-pointers this year. Curry, I believe, is number 1, but Dante is right behind him. And he was, I think he alone was 5 of 17 in this game. Alec Burks was 1 of 7 off the bench. So the two of them combined to miss a lot of shots. Only basically Josh Hart, who's 3 of 7, shot it well for the Knicks in this game. But, you know, all that put into a kind of a stew of sorts, and it was enough for the defense. And without Brunson, again, New York's different on offense. And honestly, I'm pretty confident that the version that the Hawks saw of the Knicks tonight would be a pretty awful offensive team in the aggregate. Not only Brunson, who's their best player on offense, but even, you know, Randle. I'm not the biggest Julius Randle guy, I will admit that, but he obviously carries a lot of usage for them, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other side, the Hawks did hold them to 47% from 2-point range in the game. That's very good no matter who you're playing against. They allowed only 11 free throw attempts in the game. That's also very good. The Knicks were 22 of 45 from inside of 14 feet. So sub 50% on, you know, floaters and rim shots. That's very, very good. The Hawks were very good inside the arc to play defensively. I thought the bigs, Capella and Bruno, did pretty well on that. They did, and I would say crucially, they didn't really respect anything the Knicks tried to do inside the arc, which I think that might sound crass, but it's not meant to be. Just with the personnel that the Knicks had, it was the right plan to basically not worry about that a ton. There were still some problems. They didn't force a lot of turnovers in this game, only 12. They allowed 25 fast break points. That's obviously quite bad. They allowed 17 offensive rebounds. That's not great either, but the overall package on defense worked, even if they were definitely fortunate with the shooting. Like, I don't think that the Hawks played well enough to sort of, quote-unquote, deserve a 105 defensive rating in this game, but they did play well enough. And there was at least a plan there that you can kind of see. Offensively, they were kind of a similar story in some ways, but I will say it was a 122 offensive rating that was easily the best they've been since Trae Young went down. Broadly speaking, they were very good in the first quarter and the fourth quarter. In the middle, it was pretty rough on offense, but the entire package was enough for the win. The biggest swing in Atlanta's favor was the inside the arc shooting. As I mentioned before, the Knicks were really bad inside the arc. The Hawks shot 61% on twos in this game, including 12 of 14 from 2 in the fourth quarter. So they were the more physical team. Also, sort of the way the Knicks played it in this game, they played a lot of their small guys, a lot of minutes. The Hawks were the bigger team, which is going to sound funny. If you're a diehard Hawks fan watching this team all year long, the Hawks have had some size questions and some size problems all year long. But the Hawks, I believe, played every minute of this game with a center on the court that was not Jalen Johnson. So they actually played a true center the whole game, which means Jalen played 38 minutes at the 4, and then Bay played 36 minutes. The Hawks were the bigger team, which is not often the case, but they were, and they kind of played like it, which I think was a good idea. They didn't shoot well from 3. They were 10 of 31. That was actually still better than the Knicks were, although they made 6 fewer threes than the Knicks did. They took a lot fewer, and I will say, a theme that I talked about a little bit with Glenn and also on the show previous to that, the Hawks are not creating threes right now, which I think Quinn acknowledges is not a great thing. You know, part of that's Trae, if not all of that is just not having Trae to create those shots. But that's more of a future-facing concern than a present one tonight. The Hawks also had more turnovers, 16, than offensive rebounds, 13. But they did turn those rebounds into 19 second chance points, which was actually a very good ratio. So it was mostly the work of guys like Capella. You know, Bay had 4 as well. They did a good job converting those, if nothing else. And they also took about double the free throw attempts that the Knicks did. The Knicks only took, I think, was like 11 in the game. That's really low. So the Hawks actually only were about league average in creating free throws in this game, but they took a lot more, and that obviously matters a lot. We'll come back to it later on in the podcast when we talk about the individual player stuff in this one, but 4 guys had 17 points or more. I thought Jalen Johnson was pretty comfortably the best player on the floor on either team in this game. And honestly, I think DeAndre Hunter might have been second. He played a lot fewer minutes, so if you want to go per minute, I think he was certainly number 2 on the list of guys who performed really well in this game. But Jalen was awesome. We'll talk about that later. Same with Hunter, and that was huge. Also thought the Hawks got really helpful stuff off the bench from like Trent Forrest, who is not supposed to be playing right now, but Kobe Buffkin was unable to play, and Trent was plus 14 in 11 minutes. He made both of his shots. He had 4 assists, no turnovers, good defense. Like, he was very good in this game. And yeah, all the way around, like, on one hand, I would say that only a couple guys played like super well compared to the normal baseline, but most guys were like around what they normally do. Sadiq Bey was fine in this game. Clint Capella had some nice moments, was fine in this game. Bogey struggled for sure, and we'll get into this later on. Bruno had somehow 7 turnovers in this game. That's crazy. But Garrison Masters was fine in this game. Anyway, up and down the roster, it was enough. And in the end, it was an ugly game. I have to say, like, if you were a neutral party in this game, watching it without a rooting interest, I'm sure you would have been rubbing your eyes on occasion. But part of that, you're facing a short-handed opponent, but part of that is, those two guys are very, basically Jalen and Hunter were really good, and Murray was really good in the fourth quarter, and it's a nice win. No question about it. I'm sure the Hawks, wanted to avoid losing all 3 games on this New York trip. And as we look ahead later on in the podcast, the Hawks play again literally tomorrow, or as you probably listen to this podcast, tonight against the Cavs. So that's a tough game in a lot of ways. So avoiding a loss here against a kind of undermanned opponent is certainly a nice thing to kind of end this jaunt to New York on. And we'll talk more about this game and kind of how it unfolded in a second. There are plenty of details to sort of unlock in this game. And at the end of the podcast, by the way, if you're a new listener, what we do is kind of talk about all the different players and how they performed in this one for Atlanta. But before all of that stuff arrives, a word from our partners on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors, and passion, drive, and patience are what bring home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you're looking for to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They have superchargers and exhaust kits, LED headlights, roof racks, and much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered across the board. They have over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, and you'll always find exactly what you're looking for at eBay Motors. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money is coming back to you. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, and crucially, you are not burning cash. With all the parts that you are looking for at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win that you are seeking. Keep your ride or die alive right now at ebaymotors.com. One more time, the place to go is ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, and to the game flow in this one, it was a very sloppy start that was certainly kind of befitting of the, shorthanded nature of these two teams and kind of what was a pretty ugly game on the whole, except for Jalen Johnson. So Jalen made 3 of his first 4 shots and had the first 6 points of the game for either team. Everyone else in that span on the Hawks or the Knicks combined to miss the first 12 shots. So Jalen was 3 of 4. The rest of both teams, 0 of 12. Pretty indicative of what was to come in a lot of ways. Ironically, the first person to make a field goal other than Jalen was Clint Capella, and that happened after 4 full minutes of game time. So in the first 4 minutes, no one had a field goal other than Jalen. Pretty crazy. The Knicks stayed incredibly cold in that first quarter, which honestly, in the end, kind of proved to be pivotal. The Hawks were able to hold the Knicks down so much in that first quarter. They had basically, I talked about this a little bit earlier on, but essentially New York's starting lineup in this game had only one guy I would describe as above average on offense, and that's DiVincenzo. They had some good defenders. Precious Achiuwa is a good defender. Miles McBride's a great defender at the point of attack. Josh Hart I love, but not great offensive players. And that kind of very much showed. Once the Knicks kind of played their bench guys, they were a little bit better on offense, but they were worse on defense. So there you go. The Hawks had a nice run mid-quarter, 8-0 to go up by 14. They made 7 out of 8 shots in that stretch. And then, rotation-wise, no huge surprises here with Kobe out of the lineup. And again, it's a big toe issue for Kobe. Hopefully only a one-gamer. We'll see how he's able to play, I should say, on Wednesday. But it was Hunter, Fernando, Garrison Matthews is the first 3 subs, and then Trent Forrest got the backup point guard minutes. I believe, I'm checking this again now, yes, Trent played only with DeJounte off the court, which is not a huge surprise. That's kind of the way it probably should be. Forrest played well. I thought that was for sure. Also, they wisely, I thought, tried to have both Jalen and Bogey on the court with Trent, because Forrest is not like a super offensive initiator, so you want to give him some more support, and Jalen and Bogey are the 2 guys to go ahead and do that. Quinn had a nice ATO play that he designed for Bruno Fernando on a late dunk in the first quarter, and essentially the shooting disparity that happened the entire game was even more so in that first quarter. The Hawks had their season best 15 points allowed. It was actually 18, and then the Knicks had a shot waved off during the quarter break that ended up being not counting. So Jalen had 11 points in that first quarter. The Knicks only had 15. So it was pretty lopsided. By the way, DiVincenzo was 1 of 9 from 3 in the first quarter. He took 9 by himself in the quarter. The Hawks then scored twice in a row to start the second quarter and went by 22 points. Actually, a couple nice plays by Forrest. Did a nice lob and on a drive to Jalen Johnson, and then a nice sort of drive for a push off the glass. Hunter was red hot too. He made 6 of his first 8 shots, had 14 points in the first 10 minutes. The Hawks were up very comfortably in that stretch and were up by 21 points with 4 minutes to go in the first half. But then the Knicks kind of came alive. A 13-2 run at the outset. They scored 5 times in a row, and the lead was down to 10. Jalen did score with 5 straight points in the middle of the quarter to kind of stabilize things a little bit, but then Hawks were only up by 11 at halftime, despite kind of being in control, which I kind of flagged as being kind of concerning because the Knicks were not making shots, and it was like, all right, this game is probably a little bit closer than it probably should be. But offensively, it was really good in the first half. Jalen and Hunter had 31 points combined on elite efficiency. Nothing else special, but certainly that was a big part of it. And then the second half was again kind of all over the place. The Knicks, it was kind of a couple of runs back and forth. The Hawks were still up by 15-ish points in the middle of the quarter. Jalen had 22 by the middle of the third. It was, he had a couple big shots, but then after he made a big 3 mid-quarter, New York had their biggest run of the game, 15-1, to go from the Hawks up 14 to a tie game late in the third. Bruno, I love Bruno. Everyone does. He had 3 turnovers in 40 seconds in that run. Granted, 2 of those were offensive fouls, and at least one of those was probably more on the point guard, which was Murray at the time, than Bruno, but it was still a tough stretch for Bruno in a lot of ways, through the wall away. Quinn then challenged a play on Bruno when he was called for a foul. I didn't love that call on the floor, but it was not going to be a challenge win. That was a bad challenge. I think it might have been that Quinn was trying to just stabilize a little bit, like stop the bleeding, because it was getting away from the Hawks a little bit at that point in time, but a low percentage challenge that he ended up losing. The Hawks only had 1 point in about 5 minutes in that run, and the lead essentially went from 21-0 in about 15 minutes of game time, so it was a pretty big downturn for Atlanta. Ironically, it was Trent Forrest, who was probably the guy you would guess would be the least likely to score and break the drought. He broke the drought, and then Bogey actually made his only shot of the game late in the third. That was a big one, I thought, to kind of avoid some of the downturn for Atlanta. But the offense was awful in that third quarter. No way around it. There were 5 turnovers in the third, 7 of 22 shooting, bad process, bad results, bad. But they were able to kind of overcome that. And honestly, I'll stop here and say this now. A lot of times this year, the Hawks might have lost this game. Like, they've kind of rolled over a few times. And yes, it's hard in the NBA to come back from down 21. So the Knicks probably had to use a lot of energy, all that stuff. And it kind of tilts sometimes back to the back to the team that was winning in the first place. But the Hawks could have rolled over and they didn't. So that was actually a hat tip to them. They were able to be sort of mentally tough enough to kind of fight back and not have that beat them, because they actually never lost the lead. It was tied twice, I believe, in the third quarter. But they were up. It was never comfortable. There was, by the way, the Knicks missed 6 threes in a row to begin the fourth quarter. That was also very helpful. Going back to what I said before about the shooting, there were some favors done by the Knicks. But the play of the night probably was the DeAndre Hunter drive on the left baseline for a dunk. Really aggressive and a great finish. Like, I thought Hunter was really good in this game. That was a non-Hunter-like play. Love to see that. But the lead, though, was still only down to 4 with 6.5 minutes to go. So that was as close as it got in the fourth quarter, but it was a little bit dicey. But then Murray hit a big 3. He was much better in the fourth quarter, I thought, than he was in the first 3. And then Capella scored 5 points in a row for Atlanta, kind of sneakily. 3 free throws out of 4, which is pretty solid for Clint. And then a nice finish on a putback. So the Hawks are up by 9 with the ball. 3 minutes to go. It was kind of like you're in a pretty dominant position there. It's not automatic, but you should win at that point. And then from there, they got a couple nice shots by, I think there's one by Hunter off of a nice timeout play that Quinn set up for Capella to hand off to Hunter downhill. That worked out very well. Murray hit another jumper. Bay scored, and it was basically over. The Knicks scored 3 points in about 5.5 minutes in that stretch. So was it pretty? It was not. But in the end, it doesn't need to be pretty. I mean, that's kind of the NBA. It's a long season. You never want to overreact to 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, whatever. I always preach that, and I'll say it again here. But the Hawks kind of won a game that could have gotten away from them. That's kind of the nice way to put it in this game. They did get big-time efforts from Jalen and DeAndre, which we'll talk about more in a second, and they kind of avoided disaster. But really, they played 2 excellent quarters and then 2 not very good quarters, but that was enough. With the help of some bad shooting and the Hawks kind of finishing around the rim at a higher level than the Knicks did. So they escaped there, and we'll talk more about the player stuff in a moment as well, by the way, as the signing of Dylan Windler, which took place on Monday to a 2-way contract. I'll talk about that and more in just one moment, but first, a word from our partners on the podcast. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we need the opportunity to get something out of our chest. Big or small, certain things can actually start to get to you if you let them. It's important to let the stuff out, especially to someone who happens to be unbiased on your life. So today I want to tell you about how I feel about something, and for maybe a few of you in a similar space, you might happen to understand that. And that's that I have some unease about the next steps in the media industry right now. I'm not talking about what's reported around the Hawks, although that's interesting, of course, but more so whether there's actually going to be jobs for people like me in the media industry, whether the work that I do in different ways will actually be able to continue how it is now, layoffs, all that stuff. And of course, not the most intense or life-altering topic for some people, but therapy can also be different for everybody. Most of us, including me, have bigger problems than stuff involving sports and media, etc. But it is quite important to get stuff off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking about starting about therapy right now, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule, and the place to go is betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. Get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. One more time, the website to go to is BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. All right, and before I dive into the player stuff from this game on Tuesday, the Hawks did make some transactional news on Monday. So the Hawks waited until the final day. They were allowed to sign a two-way contract, but they finally did it in the form of signing Dylan Windler. By the way, they created that space by waiving Patty Mills and converting Trent Forrest. And while I'm here, Patty Mills signed with the Heat today, so he's back in the league. But as for Dylan Windler, 6'7" wing, first round pick of the Cavs back in 2019. He's actually 27 years old now, so a very old two-way player. He's the same age as DeJounte Murray and Garrison Matthews, just for a reference point there. He's older than DeAndre Hunter, et cetera, but he definitely has some talent. He can shoot it, makes decisions well with the ball in his hands, and is a very good rebounder for a wing in particular. Personally, I think he's more of a three, but he can play a little bit of four. He played some there in the G League. It's kind of small for that, but not comically so. He won't get killed there because of the rebounding especially, but he really is like kind of wing-sized, not a huge athlete. Also, he's only eligible to be active in, he was actually active tonight, so 11 more games. It's prorated basically, but just like it was with Trent Forrest, there's a cap on how much you can be active. I think the Hawks are hoping by the end of the year they'll have some of the G League guys back, maybe a Kongwu, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of people ask, by the way, like kind of why the Hawks didn't sign a center, and number one, I don't know the answer. I talked about this a lot in the last couple of weeks, and I've noted that they probably just need some front court depth. I have said on the show previously, it didn't have to be a center. It would prefer to be a center in my opinion, but it didn't have to be because they are comfortable playing Jalen Johnson at center when they need to do that. Like tonight, they didn't play Jalen at center at all, but one of the problems with playing Jalen at center is a lack of forward depth. So I've said that a lot on the show recently as well. It makes it hard to play Jalen at center because you only really have two other forwards. So you have one lineup where you can play three guys that are forward size. You have Hunter, you have Bay, and you have Johnson. You have Wes Matthews, but he's 6'5"-ish, and also someone they don't want to play a lot of minutes. I don't think Windler's going to play a lot, no matter who they sign in the two-way contract. I said this last week as well. I'll say it again now. No matter who they signed, that guy was not going to be suddenly in line to play a lot unless there were multiple injuries in front of him. But it's just a depth thing. It's more of a functional depth thing. I think they obviously like Dylan Windler in terms of what he could be, or they wouldn't have signed him. But it is what it is. It doesn't solve the problem as far as size and depth is concerned, but he gives them more size and rebounding than someone like Garrison Matthews would in a pinch. If they were to lose Clint or lose Bruno and had to play Jalen at center a lot, they could use Windler more as a potential small ball four option with some rebounding, et cetera, than they could some of the other guys they have on the roster. So in the end, it's a two-way contract for a guy who's been around a little while, first round pick, but he's struggled to stay healthy at times, has not established himself in the league just yet. He was on a two-way this year with the Lakers. He's played some with the Cavs and with the Knicks in the past. So it's not likely he's going to change this season a lot for the Hawks, but he does have some NBA level skills for sure. In the org, I think it's just betting on talent at this point in time. And look, it's late in the year. They weren't likely to make a huge splash as far as a two-way signing. Could they have signed Miles Norris? They could have. I think that was an option that was available to them. They didn't do that, so they obviously preferred this method. I don't think it matters a ton. In fact, I would like to take a poll of Hawks fans that even remember the name of Donovan Williams, who was on a two-way contract within the last 2 years with the Hawks, who they signed late in the year, and he basically just never appeared. And that might happen to Windler too. So we'll see. But low impact. I would have criticized them heavily if they had not signed anyone, because that would have made no sense at all. But in the end, it's kind of a shrug, and hopefully they can unlock something there. But he is 27, so it's more. I would say that there's like two different kinds of two ways. It's more of the long-term development guy, and then there's kind of the plug-and-play guy. Windler's more of the plug-and-play, but maybe with a smidge of long-term stuff, if they can get him healthy and the shooting plays up. But anyway, not a huge impact thing, which is why I'm saving it till now. But there you go. Anyway, to the actual game player evaluations on this Tuesday. Like I said before, not a ton of guys played incredibly well, but it was good enough. Off the bench, I will start positive. Trent Forrest was really good in this game. I think some people missed that Kobe was not available to play in this game, and I got some angry replies for talking about Trent. Number one, Kobe was just unavailable to play. If they had played Trent over Kobe, I would not like that either. I've said before, like Kobe, he needs to play every game, etc. But Trent did play well in this game. 11 minutes, they were plus 14 in those minutes. That's pretty impressive. 5 points, 4 assists, no turnovers, made both shots from the field, good defender. So, as far as the Trent Forrest experience is concerned, it's about as good as it could have gone. There's that. Garrison was kind of a non-factor, 3 points, all free throws, 3 rebounds. He was fine, but nothing to write home about. Bruno had a couple of high highs. Actually had one really big dunk and had one really huge block. So some nice highlights. I'm talking about that positively because he also had 7 turnovers in 23 minutes. That is impossible. Now, I think 3 at least, it might have been 4, were offensive fouls. And they do count as turnovers. So those are moving screens. There were at least 2 or 3 of those. Not great. Bruno has some issues getting fouls at times in the past. Also had a couple of passes that were terrible. So it was truly highs and lows with Bruno. He'll be better than this, but he was a negative, I thought, overall, even with the pop plays. But it happens. DeAndre Hunter, though, was awesome off the bench. 22 points in 25 minutes. He was 7 of 9 on 2s and 2 of 5 on 3s. In the 10 previous games coming in, he was shooting 53% from the field and 50% from 3. And that kind of stayed in that range right now today. So I think he's like around 70% true shooting for like the last 3 weeks or so. That's not sustainable, but Hunter is playing very well. He's getting to the rim. He's being much more aggressive. He looks healthy, which is good. They're not playing a ton of minutes, but that's fine with me. So also he closed the game, which was the right call. I thought he was better than Bogey just flat out in this game. So very positive stretch from Hunter. I'd recommend not getting too crazy. This is year 5, but he has had some injury stuff. So knock on wood again. You hope that he's healthy, number 1, and effective, number 2, because he is a guy on this roster that can kind of do stuff that most guys can't do on this roster. Jalen's kind of a different tier, of course, than Hunter is, but beyond Jalen, like Hunter being a 6'8", two-way wing is very helpful. That can kind of keep him on the floor, keep him engaged, and playing well. To the starters in this one. Bogey was the worst of the starters. It's crazy, though. I'll say this. I've made this point before. Even when Bogey plays poorly, the Hawks tend to do well in his minutes. Because he has by far, by the way, the best on-off splits on the team this year. Coming into today, the Hawks had like a +2 or 3 net rating with him on the court for the year. And I think they were like looking at this now, they were -8 with him off the court. So like Bogey has huge plus-minus splits. That happened again tonight. He was +19, and again, they won by 16. He wasn't good in the game. I think it was probably his worst 3-game stretch of the season overall. He's 9 of 32 from the field the last 3 games. The Hawks are not listing him on the injury report, but it's kind of common knowledge right now around the team that something is happening with Bogey's right hand. I think it was Jalen Johnson. I couldn't quite tell who it was. I think it was Jamila that asked Quinn about that. He didn't really give an answer to that post game, but I'm not sure how much of a factor that actually is. But certainly, it's a shooting hand. He's not shooting well. We'll see. But part of that's maybe not having Trey, because that affects everybody on offense. But regardless, Bogey's not playing well right now, so hopefully they get him going in the near future. But outside of that, everybody else was fine. Capella had a nice closing stretch in the fourth quarter. 13 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block for Clint. He finished better as the game went along. I think he missed his first 3 shots, maybe first 4 shots, and then he was 5 of 6 or 7 after that. So he was better than that after he had crucially had the 5 points in a row in the fourth quarter. So not his best self, still working himself back into shape, back into health, all that stuff. But I thought he was showing better signs as the game went along. Sadiq wasn't efficient, 17 points and 17 shots, but was fine otherwise. 9 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, a block. Played physically, gave them just okay production across the board, was fine. Like a B- kind of game for Sadiq, which is fine, all you need. And then Murray, weird one. Like I think that he did not play well for about 3 quarters in this game. He wasn't just like horrible, but certainly not his best work. And then you look up, he makes a couple of shots in the fourth quarter, certainly, which I mentioned before, a couple of big jumpers. The 1-3, they put them up by 7, was a massive shot. A couple more putting the game away. He was better in the fourth quarter, ends up with 21, 9, and 6. I'm not sure that's like indicative of how good he was, and the Hawks only were +2 in his minutes compared to Trent. And he wasn't super efficient, but still, I thought Murray was by the end was fine. I would have thought if the Hawks won this game by this margin that he would have been better, but that's a credit to Jalen and a credit to DeAndre. So there you go. And also I will say this, the Knicks loaded up to Murray a lot. They definitely threw the kitchen sink at him. Not quite the Trey treatment, but Miles McBride is an excellent defender, and he was on Murray the entire game. So a tough sledding there for him. And a win is a win is a win. And then lastly, Jalen Johnson was excellent, man. I mean, he was the best player on the court. I said it once before. I'll say it again now. He was awesome in this game. He wasn't quite as dominant offensively down the stretch. I think he had 22 points mid third quarter, ended up with 26, but was plus 23 in the game. That's a game best, and that was indicative of how he played. 9 rebounds, 7 assists. He actually had the second most points he's had all year with 26, and the second most assists he's had all year with 7. Plus the rebounding, he was 10 of 14 on twos, 2 of 3 from 3. No free throw attempts, but that was because he was just finishing everything anyway. So I thought Jalen, the passing was really good. Defensively, a little bit overeager a couple times, but I thought he was fine defensively. And obviously, Hawks fans don't need to be told this, but the future's incredibly bright. He's already playing very well. I think / hope. And look, I called this out preseason, so hopefully I'm right in the end. But I thought Jalen was a real most improved candidate preseason, and I think with every passing day, I don't really know why he's not talked about in the top 2 or 3 of that award race right now. Even in the betting markets, etc. FanDuel, if there's still odds there, I think he's still a real candidate for it. We'll see. But he's been playing great basketball in recent days, and certainly was the best player on the court tonight. So they don't win the game without Jalen. I'm confident in saying that. Even if they won this game by a pretty comfortable margin in the end, if he doesn't play, they don't win it. I don't think so. That's pretty high praise in itself. All right, that's all I have on the player side in this one. In the end, a really nice win. I mean, yes, the Knicks were shorthanded, no question about that. But it's still a road win at MSG, avoiding the 3-game losing streak. And in advance of a game on Wednesday, it's going to be a pretty tough one in some respects. So you didn't want to have this one go the wrong way. I know there's the constant back and forth between people that want the Hawks to tank or lose every game, or the people that want them to make the play-in. I'm not weighing in on that. I'm just giving you the analysis of the game itself. The Hawks want to win. They're playing to win. That's very obvious. And they won the game. So there you go. From here, I said it before, but the Hawks play again on Wednesday back at home. A very quick turnaround. It's back-to-back for both teams, actually. The Cavs play tonight as well. So, all things equal travel-wise, it might even be advantage Hawks slightly because they're actually coming home. And much like the game tonight, Wednesday's game will be a battle between wounded teams. So the Hawks still will be without Trey and Onyeka, but the Cavs won't have Donovan Mitchell, who is their best player. He's already ruled out. Max Strus did not play tonight. He's one of their better wings. He didn't play tonight. We'll see about him playing tomorrow. But we'll see how that all looks. I'm looking as we speak to make sure I have the best number to give you right away. Yeah, our friends at FanDuel make the Hawks actually like a 1-point favorite at this moment. Again, they already know that Mitchell is out. So we'll see. Another coin flip game. Basically, all these games have been coin flips. The 2 games in New York, the 2 games in Brooklyn, the Hawks were like tiny underdogs. They lost both. Tonight, they were a tiny underdog again. They won it. They might be a tiny favorite on Wednesday, but it's essentially a bunch of 50% kind of games, and they've won one of them out of the 3, and we'll see if they can make it 2 out of the 4 on Wednesday. But we'll have a full breakdown of that game after it is over on Wednesday evening. And with that, I will plug a few things before we get out of here. One thing is we have, after most games, a bonus episode of sorts on our audio-only feeds from the folks at Locked On Sports Atlanta. That only goes in the audio-only platforms. They have their own YouTube channel, but if you are looking for some extra listening, just bonus stuff, no less from me by any means, but that'll be labeled as the postcast in our audio-only platforms. If you see that, don't be surprised. That's just some extra content coming from the Locked On Sports Atlanta crew. Also, you can subscribe, rate, and review this podcast across podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Castbox, Overcast, all those places. Amazon Music has all of the Locked On Podcast Network as well, so you can find us on all those platforms as well as on YouTube. And it would do a huge favor for me if you were to subscribe and auto-download the podcast across platforms, even multiple times, audio, video, etc. The best way to support the show is to click around, download on a regular basis, and I very much appreciate that. Also follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland, and I write about the Hawks on a regular basis at patreon.com/BT Rowland. If you want to check out that, I'd be appreciative of that as well. All right, I will be done rambling on this Tuesday. I'll have a podcast about 24 hours from now, breaking down Hawks Cavs on Wednesday. And until then, we'll see you next time.